So today, we're going to pull on this incredible golden thread, one that connects a really cutting-edge theory of consciousness all the way back through 1,000 years of Persian philosophy and poetry. It's this fascinating story about how the same big idea can just echo across centuries.
Okay, let's just kick things off with a wild thought. What if our most modern model of the mind wasn't actually invented in a lab, but was first discovered in a poem? I know, it sounds pretty out there, but stick with me on this.
All right, to see where this thread leads, we've got to start with the science as it stands today. We're going to be looking at two related modern theories, the Brain Kinematics Model and the Continuity Theory.
So, first up, we've got the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM for short. The big idea here is that our consciousness isn't some steady, continuous stream. Nope. Instead, it emerges in these tiny, rapid flashes. The theory calls them oscillatory bursts, or neural strain packages. Honestly, the best way to picture it is to think of consciousness not as a constant light bulb, but more like a flickering candle.
And working right alongside that is the continuity theory. This one suggests that reality isn't just a collection of separate static objects, like a bunch of Lego bricks. Instead, you should imagine it more like a flowing river. See, change and motion aren't things that happen in the river, they are the river. They're literally built into the very fabric of being itself.
So you put these two together and you get this really radical new way of looking at reality and consciousness. But here's the kicker, the central question for us today. Is this vision truly new? Or has it been seen before, just through a totally different lens?
Well, to answer that, we're going to have to jump in a time machine. Our first stop is the 17th century, where we're going to meet a Persian philosopher. This guy, without even knowing it, laid down the metaphysical blueprint for all this science. And by metaphysical, we just mean he was trying to figure out the fundamental nature of reality. The basic rules of the game for existence.
This is Mulla Sadra, and his philosophy basically turned a lot of classical ideas completely on their head. His core argument was that existence itself is the number one reality. And he didn't see it as a bunch of separate things, but as this graded, layered continuum. And crucially, he proposed that motion and change aren't things that happen to objects, they are an inner property of the objects themselves. For Sadra, time isn't some river we're all floating in, it's a property of our very being.
Now this is where it gets absolutely wild. Just look at the direct comparison. On the left, you've got Mulla Sadra back in the 1600s. His idea of a graded continuum of being is a stunning, almost perfect parallel to the field continuum from modern continuity theory on the right. His substantial motion lines up perfectly with this idea of intrinsic change. It's like they are describing the exact same structure, just using the language of philosophy versus the language of science, 4 centuries apart. It's incredible.
So here's the bottom line. Mulla Sadra basically provided the philosophical geometry, the underlying structure and rules for a view of reality that science, hundreds and hundreds of years later, would find a way to actually mechanize and model. He drew the blueprint.
But believe it or not, the thread doesn't stop there. If Sadra gave us the structure of this reality, we can go back even further, all the way to the 11th century, to find the feeling of it in the work of the brilliant poet and scientist Omar Khayyam.
Khayyam's poetry is just famous for its intense focus on the fleeting present moment. As he says right here, the past is gone, the future isn't here yet. All that's real is now. And this isn't just some seize-the-day bumper sticker. This is a deep description of consciousness itself. It directly echoes that scientific idea we talked about, the flickering candle, an experience of time as a flash of presence, not a smooth, straight line.
And this slide, wow, it connects his poetry right back to the science. His poetic description of flashes of awareness is a perfect parallel for the BKM's strain bursts. This is what scientists call a phenomenological account, which is just a fancy way of saying it's the first-person subjective feeling of a process. Khayyam wasn't modeling the brain, he was describing what it felt like to have one. He felt what the BKM now models.
Right, so just to be super clear here, Khayyam wasn't doing neuroscience, he was a poet, but he perfectly embodied the output of the neural mechanism that BKM describes, a consciousness that feels flickering, momentary, and cyclical.
So now we have our 3 points in time, an 11th century poet, a 17th century philosopher, and a 21st century scientific model. So let's connect them all and trace this incredible intellectual lineage.
It's so elegant when you see it laid out like this. You can see the whole evolution of the idea. It starts with the raw feeling of existence. That's the poetry of Khayyam.
Centuries later, that feeling is given a philosophical structure, the fundamental rules of being by Mulla Sadra. And then finally, in our time, science gives it a physical mechanism with the BKM and continuity theory. The feeling, the structure, and the mechanism. Each step just builds on the last.
I just love this metaphor from the source material. It puts it so perfectly. The early poetry and philosophy are the wings, right? They create the shape, the potential for flight. But the modern science, that's the engine that actually makes it fly.
So, what does this all add up to? Well, it gives us this beautiful, unified framework for understanding reality, where these three minds are like three mirrors, all reflecting the very same thing, just from different angles.
And this table just brings it all home. You have these three layers. Khayyam gives us the lived reality through the mode of poetry. Then Mulla Sadra gives us the interpreted reality through metaphysics. And finally, the BKM and continuity theory give us the mechanized reality through science. It's not that one is right and the others are wrong. They are all essential parts of a complete picture.
And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. The science doesn't make the poetry and philosophy obsolete, it completes them. This is a story of an idea evolving over a millennium, a seed of intuition planted by a poet, nurtured into a system by a philosopher, and finally blossoming into a testable scientific model. Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought, doesn't it? If this 1,000-year lineage is possible, it kind of makes you wonder what seeds of future science might be hiding right now in the art, poetry, and philosophy of our own time. What feelings and structures are we exploring today that might become the engines of tomorrow?